The day my daughter-in-law stood up in that conference room and told the mediator I had lost my mind. That was the day I finally understood what 38 years of quiet had cost me. I didn't say a word. I just sat there with my hands folded on the table, the way I'd sat through 1,000 uncomfortable silences in my life. My son was next to her, not looking at me. He was staring at the legal pad in front of him like it contained the answers to questions he hadn't thought to ask yet. The mediator, a small woman with reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, glanced at me over the rims. She was waiting for me to react. Everyone in that room was waiting. I didn't give them anything. I want to tell you how I got there. Because it didn't start in that conference room. It started the way most damage starts, slowly, quietly, in a house that looked fine from the outside. My name is Conrad. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant for a firm out of Columbus, Ohio. I know how to read numbers the way some people read faces. I can tell when something's been moved, when something's missing, when the columns don't add up even though someone worked very hard to make them look like they do. My wife passed 11 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end. Her name was June, and I won't say much more about her except that she was the kind of woman who made every room feel warmer just by being in it. And when she left, some of that warmth went with her permanently. I have one son, Benji, Benjamin Thomas Whitfield, named after my father and my wife's father both. He grew up quiet and careful, the kind of boy who thought before he spoke, who saved his allowance and kept his room tidy without being asked. I was proud of him the way fathers are proud when they see something of themselves in their children, not the ego of it, but the recognition, the sense that something you valued got passed on. He married Shanna 8 years ago. I'll be honest. I had reservations, not about her as a person exactly, but about the speed of it. They'd been together 14 months. She was 31 to his 33. She worked in event planning and had opinions about everything with a confidence that I'd learned, over 6 decades, often masks a lack of experience. But Benji loved her, and that was enough for me. I kept my reservations where I kept most of my private thoughts, inside, where they didn't cause trouble. The first few years were fine. We had holidays together, birthday dinners, the occasional weekend visit. Shanna called me Conrad, not Dad. I didn't push it. She was pleasant enough, attentive when she needed to be, and she made my son happy in ways I could see on his face. Then my balance started to go. It wasn't dramatic. It was a gradual thing, a wobble here, a misstep there. My doctor called it a vestibular disorder, inner ear related, manageable with medication and some lifestyle adjustments. I wasn't dying. I wasn't even incapacitated. But I was 62, living alone in a 4-bedroom house in Granville, Ohio. And one morning I missed the step of my back porch and went down hard on the brick path and lay there for about 4 minutes before I got myself up again. I didn't tell Benji right away. I didn't want to be a problem. That was my first mistake. When I finally told him, 2 weeks after the fall, when he noticed the bruising on my forearm at Sunday dinner, he was more upset that I hadn't said anything than about the fall itself. Shanna was the one who suggested I look into transitioning. That was her word, transitioning. There are some beautiful communities, she said, with the brightness she applied to everything. Independent living, but with support available, it would give all of us peace of mind. I was 62. I still drove. I still worked part-time consulting. I played golf twice a week. I appreciate the thought, I said. I'm fine where I am. The subject dropped, or I thought it did. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that Shanna had begun a campaign I couldn't see. Not a loud one. The quiet kind. The kind that works in the gaps between conversations, in the things said to other people when you're not in the room. She started telling Benji that she was worried, that the house was a liability, that it was too much for me to maintain, that the responsible thing, the loving thing, would be to help me downsize before something happened. She wasn't entirely wrong about the house. It was a lot of house for one person. But it was also the house where Benji had grown up. The house where June had tended her garden until she couldn't anymore. There were 38 years of this family in those walls, and I was not in any hurry to walk away from them. But Shanna was patient. I'll give her that. Over the next year and a half, Benji started dropping things into our conversations, gentle things. Have you thought about what you want to do with the house long-term, Dad? Have you looked at any of those communities near Westerville? I talked to a financial advisor who said there are some really good options for people in your situation. I should have asked more questions. I should have asked who that financial advisor was. I should have asked why my son was consulting financial advisors about my situation without me. But I didn't, because I trusted him. He was my son. Here is where I have to be honest with you about something. I was never good at confrontation. I'm a man who communicates best through observation, through analysis, through the slow accumulation of evidence. In my professional life, that served me well. In my personal life, it left gaps. My wife used to say I was the most present absent person she'd ever known. She meant it affectionately, but she wasn't wrong. So I watched, and I said little. And things moved around me the way things do when someone has decided where they're going to end up, regardless of what you want. The first concrete move came about 2 years after the fall. Benji asked me to add Shauna to my banking accounts, not as a beneficiary, as a cosigner. He framed it as convenience. Just in case something happens, Dad, so someone can manage things if you can't. He'd talked to an elder law attorney, he said. This was the recommended approach. I asked the attorney's name. He hesitated, then gave me a name I didn't recognize. I said I'd think about it. I didn't do it. And for 6 months, nothing more was said. Then my doctor adjusted my medication, and there was a 3-week period when I was genuinely unsteady, dizzy, fatigued, not myself. I told Benji I was having a rough patch. Shanna appeared at my house 2 days later with a bag of groceries and a folder. The folder contained a power of attorney document. "We just want to be able to help Conrad," she said. She was standing in my kitchen with her coat still on. "If something happens and you can't manage things yourself, we need to be able to act quickly." I looked at the document. I recognized the structure of it. I'd seen documents like this in my professional life, seen what they could do in the wrong hands. "I'll review it with my own attorney," I said. Her smile stayed in place, but something behind her eyes shifted. I took the document. I called my attorney, a man named Boyd who'd handled my estate planning for 15 years. Boyd read it over and called me back inside 48 hours. "This is broader than standard," he said. "This gives them authority over your real estate, your investments, your accounts, everything. And it's durable, meaning it doesn't require you to be incapacitated. It becomes effective the moment you sign." "So they could sell my house," I said. "They could sell your house," he said. "They could liquidate your portfolio." "Conrad, I need to ask you, is there any pressure here?" I sat with that question for a long moment. "Not overt," I said. But, I said, and left it there. Boyd recommended I establish a revocable living trust that kept control firmly with me, and named him as a secondary trustee in the event of genuine incapacity, with a specific definition of what that meant. 2 licensed physicians, written documentation. Not one family member's word. I didn't tell Benji about the trust. I set it up quietly, signed the documents in Boyd's office on a Tuesday morning in February, and went home and made myself a sandwich and sat at my kitchen table for a while. I want to describe what that felt like, because it wasn't triumphant, it was sad. There is a particular kind of grief in the moment you realize you need to protect yourself from your own child. I don't have a better word for it than heartbreak. Plain, quiet heartbreak. When I told Benji I wasn't going to sign the power of attorney, not that version, he was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he said, "Dad, we're just trying to help you." "I know," I said. "I've taken care of it another way." "What way?" "A trust." Boyd set it up. Another silence. "You talked to Boyd without telling us. It's my estate, Benji. He said he needed to talk to Shanna. He'd call me back." He didn't call back for 11 days. When he did, it was brief, formal. He said they felt hurt that I hadn't included them in the process, that they were only trying to look out for me, that they hoped I understood how much energy they'd put into worrying about my well-being. I apologized for not keeping him in the loop. I did not apologize for protecting my own assets. Things cooled after that. Visits became less frequent. The warmth that had been there, the warmth that was imperfect but real, thinned out. I told myself it would pass. People navigate these conversations in families all the time. We'd find our way back. What I did not anticipate was the real estate agent. About 4 months after the trust conversation, I got a call from a woman who introduced herself as representing a firm out of Columbus. She'd heard my home might be coming on the market. She'd love to discuss what it could sell for in the current environment. I asked her who'd referred her. She hesitated. Said she wasn't sure she should say. She didn't want to cause any awkwardness. I pressed. She said it was a young woman, event planner. She'd reached out on behalf of the family. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a while after that. Not angry. Not yet. More like a man who's been tracking a set of numbers for months and has just seen them resolve into a pattern he was hoping wouldn't be there. I called Boyd. "She listed my house with an agent," I said. "Or tried to." "Without my knowledge, she can't do that," he said. "You own it outright. There's no authority." "I know she can't do it. She did it anyway." Boyd was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Conrad, I think you need to document everything from here forward. Dates, conversations, contacts. Can you do that?" "That," I said, "is what I do. What happened next took another 8 months to fully develop, and I'm going to compress it here, because the details are long and the pattern is really the point." Shanna spoke to my brother. "My brother is not a close relationship. We live in different states and have different lives. But she reached out and told him she was concerned about my cognitive decline." She used that phrase, cognitive decline. My brother called me, confused, asking if I was all right. I was fine. I told him so. I also asked him to keep that conversation in mind. She spoke to my neighbors. 2 separate neighbors told me, separately, without knowing I'd spoken to either of them, that a woman had stopped by asking concerned questions about whether I seemed to be managing all right, whether they'd noticed anything worrying. She contacted my financial institution. I know this because my advisor called me directly, puzzled, to report that a woman identifying herself as my daughter-in-law had called to inquire about my accounts. The bank had not disclosed anything. I was the sole account holder, but they wanted me to be aware. Each of these individually could be explained. Taken together, they told a story I'd been trained my entire career to read. She was building a file, constructing a picture. She was going to attempt a guardianship proceeding. A guardianship proceeding, for those who don't know, is a legal process by which a court can declare an individual incapacitated and assign someone else to manage their affairs. It is, when used correctly, a protection for people who genuinely cannot care for themselves. When used as a tool, it is one of the most effective mechanisms for stripping an independent adult of their rights and their assets. I had seen it in my professional life. I had testified as an expert witness in 3 such cases over the course of my career. I knew exactly what the playbook looked like. I had already secured my trust. Now I needed something more. I had my doctor document my medical status formally. Clean bill on cognition. Vestibular disorder well managed. No impairment to financial or legal decision-making capacity. Signed, dated, filed with Boyd. I had a neuropsychological evaluation done. Not because I was worried about my own mind, but because I wanted objective documentation that my mind was intact. The evaluator, a woman at Ohio State, told me afterward that I was cognitively in the top percentile for my age group. She seemed almost surprised I'd come in voluntarily. I told her it was for documentation purposes. I documented every contact Shanna had made on my behalf without my authorization. I had the real estate agent put in writing that she'd been contacted by someone representing herself as acting for the family. I had my neighbors write brief statements. I had my financial advisor send a written account of the unauthorized inquiry, and then I waited. I want to be clear about something. I was not trying to harm my son. I was not building a case against my son. Benji was a man I loved, a man I had raised, and I was not certain of his role in all of this. He may have known everything. He may have been led. I didn't know, and I didn't want to assume. But I needed to be ready. The filing came on a Wednesday morning in October. Boyd called me before 8 o'clock. "They've filed," he said. "Guardianship? Guardianship. Columbus Probate Court. Shanna is the petitioner. Benji is listed as a supporting party." I sat down. "All right," I said. "Conrad, are you okay?" "I'm all right," I said. "Let's get to work." The hearing was set for 7 weeks out. I won't walk you through the entire preparation, but I'll say this. I had more documentation than most attorneys see in cases twice as complex. Boyd was thorough, I was thorough, and the picture we built was detailed and specific and verifiable. The day of the hearing, I wore the same suit I'd worn to give expert testimony in Cincinnati 12 years before. Gray, conservative. I drove myself to the courthouse and parked and walked in and sat at the respondent's table and folded my hands the way I always folded them and waited. Shanna looked composed. She was good at composed. Benji was next to her. He still wouldn't look at me, and that was the hardest thing in the room. Harder than the filing, harder than the legal language, harder than being the man at the table who is supposed to be incapable of managing his own life. My son would not look at me. The judge was a man named Harcastle. Silver-haired, deliberate, the kind of judge who reads every filing thoroughly rather than relying on his clerks to summarize. I know this because he asked specific questions about documents that were buried deep in the exhibits. Shanna's attorney opened by describing a man in cognitive and physical decline. A man living alone in a large house at risk who had refused the help of his family out of stubbornness and possibly impaired judgment. She cited the fall on my back porch. She cited my doctor's original concern about the vestibular disorder. She cited a comment I'd made to Benji. I couldn't remember what it was, that apparently had been interpreted as confusion. I listened to all of it. Boyd had told me not to react. I didn't react. Then it was our turn. Boyd is not dramatic. He doesn't need to be. He presented the neuropsychological evaluation first. 93rd percentile across cognitive domains. The report spoke for itself. He presented my physician's formal assessment. No cognitive impairment. Vestibular disorder stable and managed. Full capacity for financial and legal decision-making. He presented my employment record. 31 years as a forensic accountant. Expert witness in 11 probate and financial fraud cases, 3 of which specifically involve guardianship abuse. Boyd paused after that and let the judge read for a moment. Then he presented the documentation of what had happened over the preceding 2 years. The power of attorney document that exceeded standard scope. The unauthorized contact with the real estate agent. The calls to neighbors. The inquiry to the financial institution. Each item dated, sourced, corroborated. Judge Hardcastle had been making notes throughout. He stopped when Boyd laid the real estate document on the table. He looked at Shanna's attorney. "Counsel," he said, "I need to understand something. The petitioner contacted a real estate agent regarding the respondent's property. The property he owns outright, with no legal authority from the petitioner to act, and this was before the filing of this petition." Shanna's attorney said that was a separate matter, unrelated to the petition's merits. "I don't think it is," the judge said. He looked at the document for another moment. "I'd also like to understand," he said, "what the petitioner's financial interest would be in the event that a guardianship were granted." The room went very quiet. Shanna's attorney said she wasn't sure of the relevance. "I think the relevance," the judge said, "is fairly clear." I looked at Shanna then. Just for a moment, her face had changed. The composure was still there, technically. She hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, but something behind it had gone flat and pale. She looked like a woman who had planned for many contingencies and had not planned for this one. I looked at my son. He was finally looking at me, and on his face was something I hadn't seen there in a long time. Not anger, not guilt exactly. Something older than either of those things. Something that looked like the slow and terrible arrival of understanding. Judge Hardcastle denied the petition. He went further than that. He noted in his ruling that the petition appeared to lack merit and showed evidence of a possible ulterior financial motivation, language that Boyd told me later was unusual and significant. He ordered Shanna's attorney to submit documentation supporting the basis of the filing within 30 days. He noted the court's concern about the pattern of unauthorized contacts. He did not accuse her of anything. He didn't need to. Courts talk in careful language, but that careful language has weight, and anyone who knew how to read it understood what had just been said. Boyd shook my hand outside the courtroom. I drove home. I made myself lunch. I ate it standing at my kitchen counter looking out at the backyard, at the garden that June had planted and that I'd kept alive in my own imperfect way for 11 years. The roses were done for the season. The ornamental grasses were still standing, pale gold in the October light. I thought about Benji. He called me that evening. I was sitting in the chair by the front window where I usually read, and I almost didn't answer. Then I did. He didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear him breathing. "Dad," he said finally, "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything right away. "I didn't know about the real estate agent," he said. "I want you to know that. I didn't know she'd done that." "What did you know?" I asked. Another long pause. "I knew she was worried about you. I believed her. I thought she was coming from a good place. And now?" He took a long time with that one. "I don't know what I think right now," he said. "I'm trying to figure that out." "That's honest," I said. We were quiet together for a moment. "The house isn't going anywhere," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm 64 years old and I am fine, Benji. I have always been fine." "I know," he said. And then quieter. "I think I knew." That's the part that cost him. I could hear it in his voice, the cost of saying that out loud, of admitting that some part of him had known and had not let himself look at it clearly. "I'm not ready to have all of it out right now," I told him. "I need some time." "Okay," he said. "I understand, but I'm still your father. That hasn't changed." He was quiet for a moment, and I thought I heard something that might have been him trying not to cry. My son, who thought before he spoke and kept his room tidy and saved his allowance when he was 8 years old. "Okay," he said again. "I don't have a neat ending for you. Life at 64 is not a story with a clean last chapter. What I have is this. The house is mine. My finances are intact. My mind is documented to be as sharp as it's ever been, which I'll confess gives me a small private satisfaction." Shanna and Benji separated 4 months after the hearing. Benji told me this himself on a Sunday afternoon when he came to the house for the first time in almost a year. He sat at the kitchen table where his mother used to sit. He looked older than I remembered. We talked for 3 hours, the longest and most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. There were things I had to own in that conversation. Ways I had stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Ways I had let distance develop and called it respect for privacy. You carry things into the next generation whether you mean to or not, and I had carried some things that were not useful. We are rebuilding. That's the word for it. Not repairing, rebuilding. It's slower and it costs more, but it's solid in a way that repairs sometimes aren't. Boyd tells me the court documentation may yet lead to further proceedings regarding Shanna's conduct. I've told him I'll cooperate with whatever is needed. I'm not pursuing it myself. That's not where my energy is going. My energy is going into the garden, into the roses that June planted and that I have tended badly but faithfully for 11 years, into Sunday afternoons at my kitchen table with my son who is learning, as I am still learning, that silence is a choice, not a default, and that the difference matters more than most of us want to admit. My granddaughter was born in March. Benji's daughter with another woman he met, quietly, carefully, in the way he does everything that matters. She has June's eyes. I don't know how that's possible, and I'm not going to question it. I held her in the hospital, and she blinked at me the way new people do, without expectation, without history, with nothing but the plain fact of being alive and present in the world. I thought, start clean. Start from here. That is what I intend to do.